Welcome to Real Life, Real Leaders. Today, our guest is my friend and fellow network member, Jeanette Gorgas. She is a board director at Delivery Hero, chief strategy, operations, and human capital executive. She's worked with companies like Grant Thornton, Deutsche Bank, and Yale School of Management. Welcome to the program, Jeanette.
Thanks for having me, Bonnie. It's a privilege to be here.
Well, we are excited to hear about your career a little bit. So you've made it to some great leadership positions and really had a huge results impact at several of these companies. And so, you don't get there by accident. And I would love for you to just tell the story of, where are you from and how did you get to where you are today?
Well, thank you, Bonnie. That's a lovely introduction. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about a little bit about my background, especially for the great work that you're doing. I have sort of an interesting journey in that my father was in the military. I was born in Heidelberg, Germany. I have lived and worked in Europe and the US. And I really did not have any idea what I wanted to be when I grew up, only that I wanted to lead and manage people and help them to achieve great things. And so when I was graduating from college, all I really knew was the military. I didn't know much about the private sector other than that I'd worked all through school, but I hadn't worked in roles where, I was going to be able to make a full-time career. And so when I graduated, I basically sat down and put myself on a rotation with my father. And we decided that, if we took a look at things and what was really going to matter, talent and technology were really the two things that drove results. And so I went to Rutgers College. It was where both of my parents went. I come from a very working class family. And we basically said, okay, well, you've got to get a job as a management trainee. And I wound up in my first job as an ops manager for an insurance company, a really great insurance company that had a super program, a company called Chubb Insurance Company. I wound up there because my friend came back from an interview and told me they had declined him for the job, but he loved the company so much, even though they declined to hire him. And I said, that's the kind of company I want to work for.
Definitely.
And so they had filled their slate of interviews, and I went to one of the information sessions and just said, I'll find my way to your office. You don't have to interview me on campus. And I was very fortunate that was my first job, and it laid the foundation for everything. I really needed to learn how things worked, and I needed to learn about incentives and aligning those so that you get the results that you want and motivating people. And it was just the perfect training ground for me. And I was there for 5 years. And then I recognized that I really needed to go deeper into the human capital side of things. I knew workflow, I knew the numbers, I knew how things worked. And I really needed to, I would say, support people in growing them in their careers and hiring the right people. And so I went into human resources, mostly in investment banking. And it was, to say that it was trial by fire is totally an understatement. It was drinking from a fire hose every day. I did wind up at Deutsche Bank for 12 years. It was a complex environment, certainly male dominated, but one that was very focused on performance and sometimes, too much focused on performance instead of how we achieve that performance. But right. I feel like I blinked and that 12 years went by, and I was given some really tremendous opportunities when I was there.
Yes, so you were, I was just pulling you up on LinkedIn here. So you made it to managing director, which is quite high level.
Thank you.
And I mean, it's not a low level director position. It's, in the finance world, that's a high level position. Yeah. And so that's pretty impressive. Now, where were you actually located at that time? Were you in New York?
Thanks for asking, Bonnie. Managing director was the highest rank you could achieve. And I can remember what it took to get there and the standards that we held ourselves to achieve that rank. And I was so proud to be there. And it was, I would say, a moment where I felt like the sky was the limit. I worked for a very tough boss who was the CEO of a big division. And he was really no nonsense, and I loved it. He made me better every day, and it was hard, and it was really fantastic. And he helped to shape my trajectory, and I would say was a very big proponent of women. There were not a lot of us, because as you know, you start losing women in the pipeline at a certain place. And I was a big proponent of diversity and worked on a big part of our plan for diversity while I was there. But he was a big supporter, and I was very proud to work for him for a long period of time. And I was in New York when I started, and then I put my hand up and we had a crisis. And I stepped in and said, let me help to solve it. And out of that, I had the opportunity to work for him in London. And it was wonderful. I really enjoyed it.
That's what an experience. And good for you for putting your hand up.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was definitely not riskless, but it was exciting. And, you know, I did just get to a point at Deutsche Bank where I felt like I needed to do something different to pivot, because I had the rotation of being an ops manager. I'd had the rotation of being an HR person, a human capital leader. And if I wanted to be a C-suite leader, I needed to go back and I would say learn. I was always quite strategic, obviously, because I grew up in a very strategic military family, but I knew I had to go back and learn more about finance and strategy and general management. And so I just chose to go back and get my master's degree. And that was a tough call. I did that when I was 40 years old. I did it while I was working, while I had the opportunity to also go to the Yale School of Management and really run the MBA program there. So it was pretty exciting to get to do both of those things at once. I had just had a great network, and part of my network was the incoming dean for Yale School of Management. And at the same time, I started my master's degree at the LSE in an executive program. And
wow.
It was great.
You know, so there are a couple of things I'm thinking about as you're saying that. One is you knew what you didn't know.
Yeah.
And you have actively pursued that. I think that's really important for any leader, is to know what you don't know and know that you need to go get it. And then you took some risk along the way. And, you know, also another part of, you know, our leadership path is it definitely includes risk. Today's podcast is brought to you by EDA and Women Execs on Boards Network. EDA, formerly known as Executive Development Associates, provides leadership development for the top 5% of your organization with custom executive programs, C-suite coaching, succession planning, and more. For more information, please visit www.executivedevelopment.com. And Women Execs on Boards is a network of high-level and often high-profile women who have all completed governance education at Harvard Business School and who are working together to collectively advance the state of women on boards and in senior executive positions. We have a new inspirational leadership book about courage, adaptability, resiliency, sense-making, and vulnerability, all shared through the stories and the struggles of 36 of our women leaders. The book is called The Courage to Advance and will be available in North America on September 14th and in the rest of the world in December of 2021. You can pre-order an individual copy at Amazon.com, or for multiple books for your book clubs or other groups, please go to www.thecouragetoadvance.com. So you end up there at the Yale Management School, and then you come back after you get through with your MBA. So tell us after that.
Yeah, and I would say that was, you know, the biggest career leap for me, which was I had a general management role at the Yale School of Management, and I'd finished my master's degree, which was really exciting. And it was a real challenge, I would say, to get to the right place next. I was very lucky because I found my way to Grant Thornton, was able to do that. But before I did that, you know, I was still sort of, I would say, pigeonholed in the narrow path. I was put in the narrow path of where I could do HR work, I could do some ops work, but, you know, I'd had this leadership role for, you know, a very important MBA program. And I was ready for that next step after I had my master's degree to take an even bigger role than what I'd had at Yale. And people needed HR people and they wanted me to be their HR person. And I think it's really fascinating. I had a lot of opportunities to do that, and it just wasn't what I wanted to do. And I think even now we want to put smart businesswomen in certain roles that seem appropriate for a woman to be in.
Right.
And whereas, why wouldn't you hire somebody like this as a COO? I was an ops person. And so that was a real challenge, I would say, to get to the right place. I was very, very lucky to find my way to Grant Thornton. And again, much of that was luck. I networked with somebody who was a CHRO. She wanted to hire somebody on her team. And part of that interview process was meeting the CEO of Grant Thornton. And I took that meeting, but not because I wanted that job, because I really was never going to take that job. And I had been doing some consulting work in between, and I worked on a very big acquisition. So a company called Signet, which is the largest middle market jewelry company. They own Kay, Jared, Zales.
Okay.
They had just acquired Zales for a lot of money. And, I essentially did a lot of the chief strategy officer work and worked for them as a consultant, again, as, for an exceptional male leader who said to me, we're hiring a chief strategy officer. Why aren't you applying for this role? And I said to him, well, I just thought you were interviewing these other people for it. He's like, you've been doing it. You've been doing a lot of the role. And so, I interviewed for that role at the same time that I happened to connect with the CEO of Grant Thornton. And as I was talking to him, I said, I love your plans and what you're thinking of, but I really think you need a chief strategy officer. Can I put together something for you that shows you what could work with a really great CSO? And he said, yeah, I've loved our talk. I'd love to see what you're going to put together. I've already got somebody in mind for a CSO job. And I said, okay, that sounds great. Why not put this together for you anyway? So I spent some time and just whipped up a deck for him, very short, showing him what I thought somebody who's really capable in that role could do. And he came back and said, guess what? The guy that I was going to hire into that job, I'm going to make him COO. And I'd like to talk to you about being my CSO. And so I was extremely fortunate, I would say, to find my way there. But it is not without sort of constant effort. And I think that's the path that many women have found themselves on. It's very odd. It's the odd situation where somebody recognizes your capabilities and is constantly pulling you up. You have to keep your eye open for those opportunities. And it can come from very unexpected places, as this one did.
Right. Well, and I just want to point out that in two cases now, you've mentioned you worked your network. Yeah. And, that's one of the things that I've noticed and admired about you is your network is incredible and you are very skilled at using it. So you not only obviously use it for your career, but you've used it to help the women in our network, me personally. And, what I love about you is like you go away, we don't hear from you for a while, and then you like bring up this really impressive person and you're like, oh, hey, I want to bring this person to the table.
Thank
and
you.
so just sort of out of the blue. So I love that about you.
Thank you, Bonnie. That is so kind of you to say. I mean, I am really lucky. Like I said, I come from a working class family, so I was not born into a network of any kind. And somebody taught me very early on the importance of giving more than you get. And I know that I care a lot about impact. I've always cared about impact. And so that cuts both ways. On the one hand, I'm always looking for opportunities to help. And I really care about giving more than I get. Life is mostly long. Things come back to you, right? And I've always believed that we should not be fighting for, this over the same size pie. We should be making the pie bigger for everybody. And so, but it also means, because I care about impact, that I can't help everybody and do everything. And somebody said to me a long time ago, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? You're super capable, but you've got to be careful how you spend your time, because there are things that you can add value to that nobody else can. And
yes,
really that's where,
true.
we should be spending our time. That's strategy.
Right, personal strategy. You know, I just heard, I was listening to a talk by Ram Charan, really well-known management consultant, and he was saying that one of his past students, he was a professor at Harvard as part of his work, and one of his past students ended up being the CEO of a very big company in India. And so he was talking to him, and he said to him, you know, I didn't give you a very good grade. And the CEO said, no, I took it to heart. And I learned from that. And he said, well, then how did you do it? You know, how do you manage, you know, how to run such a big company? And he said, well, I learned a long time ago, I have to get it down to only focusing on 3 things at a time.
Yep.
And so, you know, when you were saying that about you can help so many people because you do have these amazing contacts, but you can't and still really get great results. You can't help everybody.
You know, though, I think it's really interesting, and I may well up as I tell you the story, like weird things happen. So I got a LinkedIn, so often I think about people in my life and how they've helped me. And I don't reach out to them every time I think about them and say, wow, remember that moment 20 years ago? You know, I think about my first manager at Chubb, who said, you need to be diligent in how you think about working. And I thought, wow, that changed my life. She really set me on the right path. I haven't sent her a text about that or anything. The other day, and I'm saying to my friend, you know, just because you're disconnected from people right now doesn't mean that you're not in their hearts and minds all the time. We have to remind ourselves that. Mm-hmm. And I got a LinkedIn message from somebody I've not talked to in 20 years. And she was an assistant in the marketing department at a company that I worked for 2 years before we had to close our office. And then I wound up at Deutsche Bank. Otherwise, I would have never wound up at Deutsche Bank. I liked working at this place. And she emailed me and said, 20 years ago, you found me crying in a bathroom. And you pulled me out of it. You waited till I came out. You sat me down. I told you what the problem was with one of our male leaders who was basically berating me and verbally abusing me. And you helped me to get it right. Then I rose to be a VP in investment banking. And now I run a nonprofit that helps youth and tells them about their self-worth the way you helped me to tell me about mine. And I was like, oh my God. Like I hadn't thought about her in forever. That was a moment where, of course, I was going to do something. And it didn't feel like a pivotal moment, but because it doesn't feel like a pivotal moment for you doesn't mean it isn't for someone else.
It was for her. Yeah. That's a great story, Jeanette, and doesn't surprise me at all knowing you.
Oh, goodness. Thank you. You're too kind, Bonnie, as always.
Well, so, all right. So then now today you're on corporate boards, paid corporate boards. And, you know, we're in this network. We're trying to advance the state of women on boards, pull other people up as well. And so, you were at Grant Thornton, and then you transitioned into more of a portfolio career now.
I did. So, I was laid off from Grant Thornton, where I loved it, obviously, in restructuring when other senior management team members were, and then there was a CEO change in succession. And, for me, it really helped, I would say, solidify the importance in my mind of governance. Because there were a lot of conflicting forces there. It was a private company. It was an all internal board. And those internal board members were also partners. And
yes, I've been involved in those before. It's so messy. It's where your governing board are employees. It's very messy.
It's very challenging. You're a CEO who needs to be elected by your employees, so you may not be able to make some of the choices, very difficult choices that you need to be making to position the company. So, I sort of wound up in the middle of that, and it just really solidified the importance of governance for me. And I was very lucky. At that time, I had been to the Women on Boards program at Harvard. I knew you, I knew Lisa Kent and others. And I was not able to sit on boards when I was at Grant Thornton because it is a public accounting firm. But as soon as I left Grant Thornton, I was able to do that. And so in earnest, I was able to begin my board search, and I let people in my network know of my interests. And I always did that in a way where my first interest is always helping somebody else. I genuinely am I'm so happy when I can do that. But I let them know what I was interested in with no pressure. And it definitely took a while, but it wasn't a long while. And one of my contacts that I met through a contact in our class at HBS Women on Boards, she basically suggested we meet for breakfast one day. I had no idea what she wanted to talk about. I knew that we were good business contacts. I didn't know how highly she thought of me or not. I really had no idea. And she said to me, I'm stepping off of a board, and, I'm going to tell you about it if you're interested. I'd like to put your name in the running. And she said, I'm recommending other people. Of course, that's my duty for good governance. And I said, wow, I'd really like to learn more. And it was a company I didn't know well. I always do my homework. I cannot be outworked. That is one thing. Like, I will always be that person who can pull the all-nighter. I will be over-prepared. Maybe it's because I'm always wondering if I know enough. And I was very, very lucky to get appointed to the board of Delivery Hero. And it's been an exceptional opportunity for me to engage with other board members that understand that good governance and revenue growth don't have to be separate. That, good governance is a part of being, is your primary responsibility of being a board member. But that there's certain things that you can do to really ensure that you're doing your job exceptionally well. And I've been really privileged to be on it. It's been a wonderful experience.
Well, first, I love that you talked about doing your homework. That's definitely a common theme with the leaders that we work with, that we have on the program, that we have in the book, and the women in our group. And the other thing is the hard work. Like, you just don't get, people sometimes look at the people at the top of the house and they think, they're lucky, or it's just who you know. But just about everyone I know who's at the top worked extremely hard to get there.
Yeah.
And so, hard work's definitely a part of it.
Bonnie, I think that's an interesting thing about assumptions. Somebody said to me, I had a coach when I was at Deutsche Bank. Again, it was just a remarkable place. They really invested in me. I went to the Harvard Advanced Management program while I was there. It was pretty terrific.
Good.
And one of my coaches said to me, people, from the feedback I've had, people look at you and they think that, it's all so easy. You're like the swan, sort of, just going across the lovely smooth lake. And he's like, but I look at you and I realize that you're going like this, paddling
exactly
underneath. He's like, you're working so hard. He said, I actually think you need to work less hard and paddle less fast, because you're really pushing yourself in a way that may not be healthy. And I think this thing about assumptions is a very interesting thing. It plays into bias, unconscious bias, and I get it wrong a lot. But I do try to ask myself, when I think somebody's a jerk or something is happening, I say, I don't know what her background is. Did she grow up as an only child because she lost two fathers? That's a real story for one of my friends, who can be brusque and sometimes selfish. My God, I think she's one of the best adjusted people I know when I think about her history. And so I think this thing about assumptions is important. There's always something underneath.
There is that, I try to talk to people about having grace, because, you just never know. The joke I always say is, they may have slept on the couch last night. You don't know.
That's right.
So along the path, what has been a sort of a standout struggle that you've had, that really, like, you maybe weren't even sure you were going to make it through, like it was just really hard. And then I would like to hear how you got through it.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of things. I mean, I've, been in places where, investment banking was in many ways, it was very male dominated, still is male dominated sort of industry. And, I've seen a lot of crazy things there as a woman, but that being said, I still think the hardest thing was this for me in my career, was this pivot into a larger role that was going to take me to the C-suite. And that, even though I'd followed a path that, many other people had followed, men in particular, where you start in one domain, you're an expert, you go to the next domain, you're an expert. the requirements for me to move into this chief strategy officer role were so different than what I'd seen them be for other people, and particularly men. And so that was a real challenge to make that pivot. And there was a point where, I said to myself, my goodness, I've learned all these things. I've done all of these things as an ops manager, as an ops executive, as an HR executive, and I'm going to be doing HR for the rest of my life. And while I think HR, you are an exceptional business person if you're an HR head, I needed the financial piece. I wanted the operational piece in my portfolio because that's what challenges and motivates me. Right. And so for me, that I really thought that I might be stuck. And I was very lucky that I didn't wind up stuck. And, along the way, I had other things that happened. I had cancer. I lost 2 parents. I lost one parent at 53. I lost the other one at 64. And so, there are definitely moments where bad things are happening. But I guess I don't list those as the biggest challenges in my career because and it didn't have to be 18 people. It could have been 2 people who were just there for me at exactly the right moments. When I was losing my father, there was somebody that I had met through work who ran one of our outplacement services. And he called me like every day. And I was like, is this guy going to call me every day? Like, I don't need that. And he's my father's age. And he was just making sure I was okay. And he is a friend until this day. I know his wife, I know his daughter, I know his grandson. And, this is where I think you don't need an overwhelming number of people around you. You just need good people around you that always want good things for you. And I think we've been raised where in an environment where you have to compete with each other. And I figured out about 20 years ago, if we're competing, again, we're all fighting over the same slice of pie. And if I'm not around people who are consistently wanting to do good things for me, they're not the right people. I am never happier, and you've seen me do it. There are board roles I'm interested in that I will share with our network.
Yes, I have seen you do that. Yeah.
All
that you're applying for yourself, and yet you bring other women in to apply as well.
Because all I want is for these boards to get the kind of candidate that they need to succeed. And every win for somebody in our network, every win for one of our friends is not a loss to us. It's a win.
It's a win. We're stronger together.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that what you're talking about, like someone that reaches out when you're going through that really hard time, that is so helpful. And it's no surprise that you continue to be friends, because you're right. Like, we don't need a large group of people. We need a few people who we can trust and count on and have that inner circle when we're going through the difficult times.
That's right.
Were there other things that you did when things got really hard, whether it was the job change or where you're sick, your parents are sick? What did you do to take care of you, Jeanette, during that process, besides just having some friends to talk to?
Yes. That's not always easy. I have to say, I do. And you heard me say this earlier before we started. I do tend to be a self-cleaning oven. So my lowest moments tend to be, in the evening, it's late, I feel isolated, and I'm more of an introvert than anybody will ever know. And so I sort of want to be isolated, but I don't want to be isolated. And so it's very conflicting. But I tell myself, I know, A, I always feel better after a good night's sleep. B, I always feel like every day is a new start, right? I like to say this about New York City, every moment is an opportunity. That's why I love New York. Because I can get up today and it will be an entirely different day than I thought, because somebody that I am having lunch with decides to introduce me to this former CEO of Deloitte. And seriously, this is a real story. I got that introduction, and he's been a wonderful and collaborative business person with me, and made some exciting things happen for me, and I hope I am doing the same for him. And so I think that, every new day is a chance to do something different and more positive. I definitely took up meditation a long time ago. I can be highly strung. I try to make sure that I'm giving myself some downtime to rest. I realized in my 40s I needed more of that than I thought. And sleep, I eat really well when I've got a stressful situation. I tell myself I do not need to make any sort of urgent and impactful choices because I may make the wrong ones. I recognize where my head is, and it's okay. Like, it's okay. I said to somebody the other day who was saying, I'm having a really down day. I never have this. And I was like, my God, if you're not feeling a little bit depressed right now, I'm worried about you.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, seriously. And that's okay. It's totally all right. It's normal. And I do tell myself a lot, like, this is normal. This is okay. And tomorrow I'm going to get up and I'm going to think about perspective, because my life is actually pretty good. It's been a lot of hard work, but it is pretty good. And there are lots of people that do not have that same opportunity. And when I step outside and I look in, I get focused on other people's welfare. And I'm way better focused on other people's welfare than when I'm worrying about my own. And that takes me out of wherever I am, usually.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you weren't really giving it as advice, but it is great advice for anyone to, turn the lens around, start thinking about other people when you get into a difficult place. And, just the other thing is being a high level leader, many people who are high level leaders are high strung. And so, that lack of sleep, lack of taking care of yourself, first of all, it sounds like you're very self-aware and you've made the appropriate adjustments. But, I liked hearing you say, like, I needed more sleep. I need more sleep right now, so I can understand that.
Same here. I feel like I need more sleep now than I ever have needed.
How you feel about the day?
It's, and this is all okay because, tomorrow things could be very different. And I think, I think perspective is just really important, and we should all be resilient in making adjustments. I was a military kid. I moved around a lot. And so one of the things I've had to come to terms with is that I'm pretty comfortable with change. And most people have not had the experience of moving between every 11 months or 6 years, depending upon what the situation was. I had to really be much more aware of what other people needed to manage change. And as a leader, that was a big deal. I can make these continuous tweaks in my life. I've always assumed there's a lot of stuff I don't know. And every day I learn there's more stuff I don't know
yes.
than I thought I didn't know. I think you have to be comfortable not letting things from the past shackle you too much. And I try to be very aware of that and make tweaks and adjustments as need be. The other thing is I like feedback and transparency, and I rely on people like you, Bonnie, frankly, and others to give me feedback. I hope for things that make me uncomfortable. And I do not like to feel uncomfortable like anybody else, but I hope to hear things that make me a little bit uncomfortable because it means I can get better, I can learn something.
That's good. Well, last question. So as you're thinking about other people who are out there who are in leadership positions, they might be struggling with things. What are just your best leadership advice?
Yeah. Well, I have the benefit of, I'm actually co-editing the Journal of People and Strategy as a guest editor with just an amazing, amazing leader named Sean Layton, who was the CEO and president of Sony Entertainment. I mean, I'm sure he'd be embarrassed if he ever saw this, but like, he created Sony PlayStation, right? So he is an entirely different thinker. And I think what I would say right now is the tools that we had, we are so experienced and comfortable with the methodical industrial age planning tools and leadership techniques that we've relied upon for so many decades. And we have an entirely different situation here right now. And it's a moment of challenge and opportunity. And one of the things he said to me is, we need to dream our way through this. And I guess what I would say, for me, what I'm thinking a lot about is, are we challenging ourselves to do enough? Because the challenges that we had in the past were like, turn the dial a few more notches. Let's turn the dial a few more notches. Now it's like, rip off the dial wall. Why do we even have that thing? And so I think for me, how do we challenge ourselves to reinvent instead of improve what we had? Because I think reinvention is what we need to do from an equal opportunity and a diversity perspective. If we had followed in the trajectory that we were going before everything that's happened this year, it would have taken us, decades more to have equality for women, no less racial minorities. We get to reinvent right now. We've done things we never thought were possible in the last year. Positive, amazing things.
That's
because
right.
We had to. I know that necessity is the mother of all invention, but I think we can dream a little bit more and do some better things now.
I love that. In fact, you gave me chills when you said that. We need to dream our way through this. Like, that absolutely gives me, but
that was Sean Layton. That was all Sean Layton.
It just gives me chills because that's exactly what we need to do. It's vision at its best.
Yeah.
And we do need to dream our way through this. And I love the idea of reinventing versus improving. That's exactly what we need. Yeah. And it's an opportunity. It's a silver lining in this year that's been filled with pain and trouble and all of that. This is the silver lining.
Absolutely.
We can come out of this different and better.
Absolutely. And not go back to normal. Go back to something way better. Hopefully.
Better. Yeah. Go forward. Go forward.
Go forward. Exactly. Go forward.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on Real Life, Real Leaders. And maybe we'll have you back another day.
Bonnie, you are a star. Thank you for having me. And thank you for all of the incredible work that you are doing to help lift so many others. It is really appreciated.
A special thank you to our listeners for taking time to tune in to this week's Real Life, Real Leaders podcast. We hope today's story inspired you. Check out previous episodes on the podcast to hear from more industry leaders, and check back next week as we speak to another leader and hear his or her great stories of triumphs and messy struggles. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate, subscribe, and share. I'm Bonnie Hageman, and I look forward to sharing more with you next week.